Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Very exciting video today. We're going to be testing out a new palette that is supposed to be a dupe for one of my all-time favorite palettes. I'm so excited about this one. Alter Ego, who you guys know I am a big fan of, recently sent me their new released palette, the Sakura palette. This is supposed to be a dupe for the Natasha Denona Retro Glam, which I absolutely love that palette. I think I ranked it my #1 palette of 2022. It is so good, and today we're gonna test them out side by side. We're gonna do kind of a blind test, so I'm not gonna tell you guys which side is which. I wanna see if as I'm applying things, if you can tell the difference. I feel like it kind of makes a game of it, which is always fun. I have not tested it out yet, but I did do the swatches and I have to say I'm pretty impressed. I noticed a couple of minor differences. We'll talk about those a little bit more at the end, but I'm excited to give it a try. I'm always impressed with these dupe palettes that they do. I think they do such a great job. Their formulas are really nice. Before we get started and have a closer look at this palette, I wanna give a special welcome to any of my new visitors here. Thank you for stopping by today. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you do, make sure that you are subscribed to my channel and also that that notification bell is turned on. With that said, let's get right to it. All right, so here it is. I have to say the packaging is adorable. I love a good macro shot. Actually, I don't know if you guys know this about me. I used to be a photographer. I did mostly like portrait photography, but I had this obsession with macro photography. I kind of did it as like a hobby, and this just kind of reminds me of my love of macro photography. Very pretty color scheme, totally matches the color scheme of the palette itself. So let's just do a little side by side of the two palettes. So here they are. Obviously they switch up the order a little bit. One thing I wanted to note is the amount of product that you get in both of these palettes is just slightly different. You do get a tiny bit more product in the Natasha Denona. This one has 19.2 grams, whereas this one has 15 grams. So these pan sizes are just a little bit smaller, but that's not a huge difference. And for the cost savings, I mean, this thing is significantly cheaper than the Natasha Denona. These things are a pretty penny. So I'm gonna insert a close-up of the palette for you guys right here, along with the swatches on my arm. And this is how the swatches compare to the original Natasha Denona. You have the Alter Ego swatches on the top, the Natasha Denona on the bottom. As you can see, these are pretty close. I don't know if on camera the differences come across. There were just a couple subtle differences in one or two of the shimmers and one or two of the mattes, but for the most part, I feel like they did a really good job. Very excited to try this out on the eyes. You guys know I love this color story. Now, this is a pretty soft color story, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a neutral color story. You do get some pinks, quite a bit of like minty green tones in here, but all of them are quite soft. Nothing's too bold or vibrant. More of a pastel palette with a handful of neutrals. So let's go ahead and give this thing a try. I'm gonna zoom you guys in. I'll try not to talk too much or give anything away as we're in it. I wanna see if you guys can tell which side is which. Then I'll zoom you out. We'll do the dupe reveal and I'll share with you guys any thoughts I had as I was applying things. If there were any differences in how things went on. Okay, so today I'm gonna use my Refer brushes. Let's start off on the right side. I'm gonna use the same brushes on both sides. I will wipe them off really well in between so we don't get any like crossover. Okay, so we're starting off on the right side. We're gonna start off in the lightest matte pink. By the way, I do already have the rest of my makeup on, which you probably guessed, but I will, as usual, link everything that I'm wearing down below. Let me just tell you what that is right now because I will forget. I'm wearing my Wet n Wild Dewy foundation, my Flower Beauty concealer, Sydney Grace in my brows along with the NYX the glue. On my cheeks I've got my Tarte Glow Bar bronzer. I also have the powder from that Glow Bar all over my face. Then I have my Makeup by Mario blush on and my Persona Zuma highlighter. And then on my lips I have my NYX Vanilla Cream Pie and then a little bit of the Charlotte Tilbury Iconic Nude. So I'm going in for one more little dip. I'll try and announce that for you guys so you guys know like how many layers I have to put on. I'll try not to edit that out because sometimes that can be deceptive. One more little dip, and this one with the same brush is just gonna go mostly below, down below, just on the very tip of the brush. So that's about 2 layers of the first palette. Let's try the second one. Again, the light pink. Did wipe off my brush. We're gonna put this all up through the crease. One more dip. So far, I feel like this shade's performing pretty similarly on both sides. Then a tiny bit more on just the tip. We're gonna go under the lower lash line. Okay, there we are so far. Very soft color, very soft starting point. Where do we wanna go next? Let's stick with the pink. We're gonna go with the deeper matte pink, side #1. Kind of just putting this right on the tip of the brush. It's just one dip in there. Just putting it right through the socket. Normally with this color story, when I'm using my Natasha Denona one, I will stick with, I'll either do like the pink and the neutral or the green and the neutral. I don't often go green and pink together, but I think I'm gonna do that today. I wanna test out both the pinks and some of my favorite greens. Let's go to palette number 2, that same darker matte pink. Again, I just wiped off my brush. I just have a little towel on my lap. Anytime I do my makeup, I always have a towel on my lap for multiple reasons. It's like wearing an apron when I cook. That's a great idea. Like a makeup apron. Ooh, I feel like I'm onto something. TM, trademark. I'm trademarking that verbally. Okay, those performed great. So far, so good. They look exactly the same on the eyes. I don't remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure in the swatches, it wasn't the matte pinks that I noticed some subtle differences in. I do remember seeing a couple subtle differences. I'll have to go back and look as I'm editing, but a couple differences in the matte greens. I noticed some of them were slightly a different tone or a different color, just very slightly. And then a couple of the shimmers look just a little bit different to me. Let's move on to, ooh, I did say I want to go green. So let's start out in the medium matte green, and then we're gonna use the cream to powder matte green, which is actually not as dark as it looks in the pan, which I find to be true with both of these palettes. But let's start off with the mid-tone kind of minty green. Again, just a tip of this on same brush, which is my Rephr number 16. I don't know if I mentioned that. You guys are probably familiar with, where's the number, with this brush right here. Even though I don't use it as much as I used to, it still is one of my best brushes. Especially when it comes to blending. This brush is slightly scratchier than some of my other super soft brushes, but it blends like it's like a workhorse. It just blends so well. I'm gonna build up a little bit more. I went in pretty light with that first layer. I'm kind of shooting for pink up through the crease and then green on the lid. I'm just kind of feathering that in towards the center. Again, that was just 2 light layers. Let's go to palette number 2. Dip in a second time. All right, I feel like we're looking pretty good so far. Let's jump over to the deepest green, which is the cream to powder formula. Kind of a more creamy formula. For that, I'm gonna take my E25 brush from Sigma. So I'm just kind of tapping that in palette number 1 in that darker green. It's more of a cream formula. And I like to just tap this shadow on. Kind of press it into the eyelid. And then I'll start moving it around. Kind of dragging it in. Oh, such a pretty color. Pretty formula. I love this formula. I'm gonna wipe that off really good on my clean rag, and then we're gonna jump over to palette number 2. See how close they are. That's just one dip on each side. I feel like they are looking and behaving pretty similarly. Don't feel like one's like a different shade or necessarily darker than the other. Okay, hopefully I applied those evenly. They look pretty darn close. Let's move on to a shimmer next. So we're gonna take the deeper green shimmer in palette number 1, and that's gonna go just kind of right above where I just put that matte. Kind of gonna go on the outer half of the lid, but not all the way to the corner. I like to keep my shimmer out of my very corner, so it's kind of just going like right here, just with my ring finger. Actually, you know what? I want to move the shade in just inside the center of the lid, and then we're going to overlap with something else. Okay, same on the other side, the deepest shimmery green, kind of starting at the center. Then I'm just taking a clean finger and kind of going over that inner edge a little bit. Okay, from here, I wanna go with my favorite shade in this palette, which is kind of the champagne glittery shade. I'm gonna take my pinky finger into palette number 1, and this is gonna go all through the inner third of the lid and kind of overlap that green. Thought about doing the shimmery mint green, but I do love that shade, but this one is such a beautiful shade. Just 2 layers. These glittery shades, if you really want them to be super opaque and impactful, I do think they need an extra layer. So I dipped in twice to that color. Look how pretty that is. And because it's so sheer, it overlaps and blends into other shades so beautifully. It's the prettiest sparkle. Okay, let's go into palette number 2. Same shade, the sparkly champagne. This was just one dip, but I feel like this one, I only need one dip. I do feel like there's just a little bit, it's a little bit more opaque than this one right here. As far as the color and just the glitteriness. Okay, that looks gorgeous. Just to use one more shade, I'm gonna go with the shimmery dark brown. And there's 2 browns in this palette that are kind of like a deep shimmery brown. I'm gonna use the more silvery taupe color one. So in palette number 1, I'm gonna take a little bit of that on my Sydney Grace kind of little smudge brush right here. Just building a bit up on the very edge. We're gonna run this just under the outer third of the lower lash line. And then I'm gonna pull it up kind of like a baby wing right here. I'm gonna wipe off that brush. Just wanna blend out that inner part right there without getting my lower lash line too dark. Same on the other side, same shade. All right, there we have it. So here is a closer look. This is the finished eye look. We're gonna add some mascara, but I just wanna show you guys up close really quickly. Do you think you know which one is which? I'm pretty impressed with both sides. They look very similar to each other. I do have a couple thoughts on just a few minor differences that we'll get to in a second, but take your guess right now. Which one's Natasha Denona? Which one's the alter ego side? Okay, now I'm gonna throw on a couple coats of my new Flower Beauty Dream Warrior mascara. Then I'll zoom you guys out. I will reveal the final look, which side was which, and then we'll share a couple final thoughts and we'll be done. And here we are. This is the finished look complete with mascara. So final guesses, guys. Which side was alter ego? Which side was Natasha Denona? What do you think? This first side, side number 1 was Natasha Denona, side number 2 was alter ego. So are you surprised by that? Did you guys notice any differences as I was applying anything? I did notice just a couple, and they kind of vary. So the first 3 mattes, I didn't notice any differences between the 2 sides. When we got to the cream to powder formula, I did think that the alter ego one did not build up quite as intensely, or it's not even a blend. When I'm using this type of formula in Natasha Denona's formula, I almost feel like it blends itself. Like you place it on and it just kind of diffuses and blends out. Whereas this one, I feel like I had to work just a little bit more to get the blend just right. I mean, it's a very subtle difference. I also felt like I needed to build up a little bit more into my brush. It didn't feel quite as soft as the Natasha Denona one does, but very, very slightly. The way that it performed on the eyes and the finished look, my outer corner, I feel like looks identical on both sides. I just feel like this one might be the tiniest bit more seamless. The dark shimmery green shade I felt like was the same in both sides. I did notice a little bit of a difference with the shimmery champagne in that this side seems a little bit more glittery and impactful than the Natasha Denona. Now that said, I've noticed this before with some of these dupe palettes with the lighter shimmers. I sometimes feel like the alter ego can be just a little bit more opaque, which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. If you like that opaqueness, if you like just impactful shimmer, I feel like you get a little bit more intensity with this shade, but I also feel like it does emphasize texture just a little bit more, whereas this one, because it's kind of a little bit more sheer, kind of a little bit, why do I do that? It's slightly more on the sheer side, but that also makes it go on a little bit more smoothly, but you still get that level of sparkle and shine, and adding just a little bit more, you can definitely get the same intensity out of it. It's just not quite as opaque from the get-go. Honestly, I don't know which formula I prefer. I can see why you might like one or the other for different reasons. I don't know which one I prefer. I like impact, but I also like that this one's a little bit more kind of smoothing on the eye. But once again, it's not a major difference. I think anyone to the naked eye would really not know unless you were trying to split hairs. Overall, from just what I've used so far, from the swatches that I've done, very happy with this. I kind of knew that I would be. I have not found one of their dupe palettes yet that I did not think did a really, really good job. I think they've just nailed how to get the shades and the formulas to mimic the Natasha Denona, and I've also felt this way with their other palettes as well. I know that they've done some duplicates kits of some other brands as well, but particularly the Natasha Denona ones. I'm very, very impressed. You guys know that Natasha Denona makes one of my very favorite eyeshadow formulas, and as a self-proclaimed like cheap person that normally doesn't fall for high-end makeup, she's one of the brands that I've kind of allowed myself to fall in love with. But I do love that Alter Ego makes such a good affordable alternative, because I know we can't all afford to go out and buy all of these Natasha Denona palettes. If I did not do this as a part-time job, I would not be buying all of these palettes myself. I definitely would go with the more affordable alternative. It would just suit my lifestyle, my budget a little bit better. But that's kind of where I stand. So far, they have not disappointed me yet. What did you guys think of the finished look? I'd love to hear if you guys notice any differences as I applied them. What do you guys think of this color story? I don't feel like this is a color story that maybe would suit everyone. I was surprised myself how much I've fallen in love with these colors. They just are so fun to play with. Flattering, but still soft at the same time. And I love that now I don't have to feel guilty every time I tell you guys how much I love this palette. I can tell you to go pick up this one if you want to save a little bit of money. So those are my final thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. I hope that it was helpful for you. I will link both palettes down below in case you want to check them out yourself. Once again, thank you so much for watching today. Hope you guys are all doing well. Let me remind you one more time, please subscribe before you leave, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.